like to invite now to the words for Blackburn. So he is also green beret. He is a United States veteran, and he will talk us about the main effort and how to find priority.
Thanks, Katerina, and thank you. I think you just hit the theme of today, and that is us. Don't listen to the politicians. Don't listen to the mainstream media. Look around and see what you have right here today. This is happening all over Ukraine. It's people like us that are getting together that affect change. We are making the change. I did not know you guys were doing the same thing that I'm doing. So I founded AFG Free, a nonprofit organization in 2021 to help our Afghan partners that we left behind. And part of that was the evacuation of Afghanis, American citizens, and our translators. And we were pretty successful at that as a people, as a network of folks, not as a government. Our government failed us in Afghanistan in 2021. But the people made the difference. And today, sitting here, I absolutely, just listening to all the stories before we came on, believe that's what's going to make the difference here in Ukraine, because we are here. My network is here. We are doing the same thing. We feed people in occupied areas of Ukraine, and we also provide medical supplies. And we help train how nonprofits work so that we can help people. And you have to network. And all the folks that are out there right now that I see that are streaming, if there's anything that you're going to get out of today, look across this network right now and start connecting with each other, because that's the difference maker. There's one thing I learned, not being in the military, but being in this space, nonprofit, it's answer the phone, answer a text message. You never know who is contacting you, who needs help, or who can help you. Who can you leverage to help you in this space? Who can you talk to provide the help of one person, and that one person will make a difference. It's been incredible in my life. In 2021, I had U.S. senators, governors, and congresspeople who found my number on LinkedIn, because I put on LinkedIn who I am and my phone number to everybody. And if you need help, call me, and I will do whatever I can to help you. And they called me to help me get their people out because they couldn't do it. That's the politicians. That's not us. Who we are difference makers. Who we are people that are willing to sit across the table like we are right now, talk with each other, help each other, and make each other better. I was talking to some nonprofit folks the other day about the difference between us and NGOs. Nonprofits will go where the danger is at. And I work with Ukrainians here to make that happen. NGOs are not going to do what we do. But our nonprofits will sharpen each other. Iron sharpens iron. We will sharpen each other and make each other better. And hearing you talk about the efforts of feeding 50,000 people and the efforts that we have feeding people in Ukraine, what an incredible investment we have together for Ukraine. It's like we've never seen before. And it's not just veterans. We socialize this on different social networks. People join all the time, and they do it for free. Nobody's getting paid. There's nobody in my nonprofit organization that gets a penny. Nobody paid me to come here. Nobody paid Mike to be here. It's not about money. It never has been about money. It's about how we can help each other, how we can help you. Why is it important to me? I'll tell you why it's important to me. Not only do I have a touch point, not only do I know people in Ukraine, but it's the moral right of what we're doing. At some point in time in your life, if you learn anything, you got to be on the right side of morality. You cannot sit on the fence. You cannot play both sides. You have to make a decision. And when you decide the moral right, you got to be all in, absolutely all in, and do whatever you can, whatever your experience level is, and not be afraid to help out, and not be afraid to contact somebody, which is another great lesson learned. Do not be afraid to talk to people that you think are in higher places. Nobody is doing more for you in this country than you are. Nobody. Don't be afraid to contact people that you think are in higher places and talk to them and tell them and move them in the right direction. Just like back in the States. I know you guys are hearing, about the States, the politicians, and, it's become political about whether or not how much aid we're going to support Ukraine with. We contact our Congress people and our senators. We're not afraid to call them and talk to them about the investment and why it's morally important to invest in Ukraine and make a difference. The humanitarian effort that is required, that they need to be on the right side of morality. This we can learn. This we can do together. And it all starts with this right here, networking and helping each other out. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I think that we're going to learn a lot from each other, and do not be afraid to contact each other during this event and afterwards so we can continue moving forward with helping Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, parents. Really, I agree with you. Thank you very much, Mike. So yes, it's very interesting. And now I would like to ask my question to Mr. Per Blackburn. So I'm often remembering when we met with you in 2022, we had an interview together to Ukraine Inform, and I was asking you a question. What is your advice? How can we deal with diversionist groups here in Ukraine? It was my question there. Now,
so you've obviously thought about this a little bit.
yes, of course, it's my job.
So, and I think that's great, because I think it's important, especially in today's world. When you talk about full-scale operations, you really are talking about also the irregular operations, actions, and activities of bad actors, and how those bad actors can move or sway the population opinion in a certain area. We're not only seeing it here in Ukraine, but you just look across the world of what's going on, really since October 7th, when the Palestinians came over to Israel, and how that narrative changed from an aggressive activity that was irregular from the Palestinians, that initially everyone was looking at the Israelis and certainly had sympathy for them, to where that changed to have sympathy for the Palestinians, right? So you take that and you look at what we're doing here, what's going on here with the disparate organizations that may be bad actors, and particularly your adversary, the people that you're fighting. And I would say that, again, bringing it down to the grassroots, the people, you really have to start leveraging the people in Russia. And that's going to be the change. To me, that's going to affect a certain level of change. Those folks, the people in Russia, have the same concerns with their military persons that are over here that you have with your people. How do you leverage them to then sway their government to stop the actions and activities that they're doing in Ukraine? Because it starts from the grassroots level. It starts from the people. So at all costs, you have to push your narrative and your messages to the people. People, again, are going to affect the change. We've seen it here in Ukraine. from 2022 to now, the difference in the population and how we are affected by different things that happen in Ukraine. Initially, when the war started, we heard the sirens, everybody rushed to cover. Now, as things have progressed, we don't, right? So there's a psychological change that occurred among the population. How that happens and how we work with that to help sway our adversary to our side is exactly what I'm talking about with these disparate groups to get them in support of you guys. The second thing is I'd say, and it goes along with what Mike said, everybody has a bad kind of something bad about them that they hear. Each person, individual human, is human nature. Whatever that is, that we think that the world looks at Ukraine as either an isolationist, we got to change that message. And I think there is that. I think that the world now looks at this as an isolated incident, and everybody's moving on with their lives, right? Well, you're not moving on with your life because you're living with it every day. We're not moving on because we're helping you every day. We've got to also take that message to the rest of the world, particularly in Europe. That message, we're not isolated. This event is not an isolated event. This event could go global really quick. Initially, a lot of the European nations were afraid of that. They've now become so used to this happening and nobody's targeting that information, that it still is a potential global threat, that they're not concerned with it. It's an isolated event. This is not isolated. We got to understand that. So there's a lot of different ways of messaging and information operations that certainly we need to start attacking, and it's a lot to do. I get it, but it's persistent. You got to persistently do this, and we've over however long it takes to win this effort. And it starts with us too on the ground, at the grassroots, talking to people on social media, letting them know, I got my brother here right next to me, lost a leg. I mean, they need to know that there's heroes like this that are out there fighting for their country. This cannot be an isolated event that nobody knows about. So that's my answer to you.
Thank you very much, Perry. Yes,
maybe your experiences today, we walked several battlefields. We saw multiple lines of defense. We were actually in trenches, right? I'd like to hear your thoughts. You were one of the first officers to make boots on the ground in Afghanistan. You've learned from wars all around the world for decades. Tell us some really what's going on.
Mike, we talked with some Ukrainians there, and we tried to talk about the tactical level, and then we had some discussions about operational strategic level stuff, but and governments and how this all is working out. And I mean, we're solving the world's problems, on the battlefield kind of thing but it kept coming down to one thing, and that's the people on the ground, the tactics that are used on the ground, and they haven't changed much. And I think we get caught up in the big military industrial complex and the big ticket items of warfare, MLRS, artillery rounds, big military types of equipment. But as I'm listening to the soldiers on the ground, I'm listening to the folks, the number one thing that they're concerned with is low technology warfare. And it's irregular. And it's this drone problem. And I get it. It not only is it an instrument that causes that wreaks havoc with death and destruction and maiming people, but it has a psychological element to it. When you hear a drone on the battlefield, that psychologically moves people to react differently. And we really don't have good defense mechanisms against this low-tech weapon system. And you're really talking about a sensor that's coming across, also can carry a payload meaning a bomb or something, and drop that, and at the same time provide information on where you're at without a human having to be there calling in fire. So this is a game changer. We all understand that. But it appears that our military industrial complex, because it's not a big ticket item, does not understand this, is not willing to put forth the effort to figure out how to combat drones. And it's affected the United States of America. 3 of our soldiers were killed in Jordan by a drone who were supposedly, we had a defense mechanism on that FOB, the forward operating base that those soldiers were at. But in reality, we didn't. And we still, as a country, have not moved forward quick enough to combat that. And I correlate that to the IEDs that we were faced with in Iraq. So not only did I invade on horseback with Afghanistan, but I was a part of the invasion force in Iraq. It was back to back. And another low-tech instrument of warfare was IEDs, improvised explosive devices, that they were literally getting these munitions off the battlefield and using them as projectiles to kill soldiers. That was low-tech, low-cost, high-effect activity used by our adversary to kill or maim our soldiers. And it got to a point where the main, like when I say maim, I mean people were losing limbs, just like you have. It almost went back like we were in the Civil War. Like people were losing limbs so quick because of these IEDs. But the people back home in the US didn't put up with it. They demanded a fix to the problem of these IEDs. And so the MRAP, which was a hardened armored vehicle, was designed to protect soldiers. That's what's got to happen here too with this low technology drone problem. And it's serious enough. It's as serious as the IEDs are. It does not take high-tech, high-cost weapons to produce a severe psychological or human toll as far as life, limb, and sometimes eyesight on the battlefield. So that was the big thing. It kept that conversation today, walking around the battlefield, kept coming back to drones. And how do we combat that? The low technology. I mean, look at it, Mike. We went to war for over 20 years because a bunch of guys got on an airplane with box cutters. That was low tech. And they drove those planes into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, and then one of them drove into the ground because of the passengers on that plane made a difference. It was the people again. So I think we get caught up with the big military complex and big payoff ticket items, but at the end of the day, you know, it's those things that affect the soldier on the battlefield that we have to move forward to protect them against.